The Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast is not monitoring the situation. Welcome to the Sock Jig Sneaker Podcast. I'm your host, Sock Jig. You can follow me on Twitter at Sock Jig and on Instagram as well. In this episode, I try to break down what's going on with the whole messy situation with Shoe Surgeon Studios, TwoJ's Kicks, and Urban Necessities, where it seems like TwoJ's Kicks signed a bad deal with Surgeon Inc., who owns Urban Necessities, and they basically have him on a 360 deal where he's liable for all the debts and he can't do anything to get out of it because he signed on the deal. So I explore that. Is there more to it? What's going on? What's the Urban Necessities side? What happened with American Eagle deals and this Saudi Arabia store? So I talk all about that and try to piece it together as best as I could. I also talk about Brendan Dunne leaving Complex and what the future of Complex might look like. And the rest of the episode is dedicated to listener questions. I asked for questions and people sent in questions. Thank you very much for sending in questions on email, Twitter, and on Instagram. There's questions about what it takes to be the sneaker of the year, the New Balance 9060 talking point that was discussed a few weeks ago, my thoughts on dream guests for this show, and a listener even requested I bring back size 13 takes. So I bring back size 13 takes. So there's a lot of show. It's all killer, no filler, no banter, no nothing. But first I talk about what I've been wearing on feet, my latest pickups, and skips and misses. On feet lately, I've been wearing the Joe Freshgoods 992. I also wore the Habibi Dunk SB. And I was wearing the Air Trainer 1 Chlorophylls, one of the greatest shoes of all time. For pickups, not that many pickups. I did pick up the Haven Regal Shoe Company Tyrolean, something like that. It basically looks like a Japanese version of a pair boot. So it's not exactly a sneaker, but I really like it. It's also Gore-Tex and it's something that will probably last like a lifetime. And also picked up the Every Now and Then New Balance Everydays Recovery Slides. The sort of a Joe Freshgoods collab. It's more about the store Every Now and Then. Those are still at my mailbox in the US, so I haven't been able to pick them up yet. But other than that, I've been skipping out on a lot of sneakers lately. A lot of them just seem like, I don't need this right now. There was a few that I tried for in terms of misses. I did try for the Supreme Good Enough Air Force One and the Jound Asics Gel Keanu. Both of those sold out in my cart, so it's probably better off I didn't cop and I'm just saving money. For the Jound one, it seems like they're on the path of Action Bronson and J Balvin and others and are doing more exclusive access, and seems like a good way to go. I did not have exclusive access on those. In terms of skips, I skipped out on the White Cement 4s. You know what? It's an awesome shoe. It's an OG. I really like the shoe. I had it in 2016. I never wore it, so I sold it off. And so that is kind of a sign that maybe I don't need to bring it back into the collection. So I know that there's a lot of pairs out there, and that's why when there's a lot of pairs, often Jordan Brand will have to use different factories and different tanneries for leather. And so some people are saying the quality is great, and some people are saying the quality is bad. And sometimes it might be on the same shoe where one has tumbled leather or whatever, and one has smoother leather. I don't know because I haven't seen them in hand. I also skipped out on the Little Yachty Air Force One, the yellow and green patent leather ones, which is a reference to 2005 patent leather Bapestas. And if you stop to think of where we are right now, these are Air Forces inspired by Bapestas that were basically knockoffs of Air Forces. So we are referencing a knockoff of the thing that we are. So time is a flat patent leather circle, I guess. Some other classic Jordans coming out, the Ferrari 14s and the Grape 5s. I've never really been into 14s at all, and Grape 5s are nice, but I have the metallic 5s, and if I had both of those sneakers, I would always just go to the metallic 5s first, so often that means I should just skip out on the Grape 5s. Another recent release that came out is the Better Gift Shop DN8. Better Gift Shop is like a Toronto store, but it's not really that known across Canada or worldwide really, because they weren't really selling online very much until very recently. So there really wasn't any reason to know who they are unless you went to Toronto. And the owner of the store is a guy named Avi Gold, not Ari Gold, who's from Entourage. And he's an OG from the Goodfoot days in Toronto. And he's got a lot of pull with Nike because I think he was involved in the Air Max 95 Toronto as well too. And so That's why some guy you may or may not have ever heard of has a collab with Nike. And personally, as I've shared, I'm not a fan of the D&8, but these guys, this Better Gift Shop one, they did a pretty decent job at it. And the price is a thing that's holding it back. The price is like 200 US. Like, no thank you. But overall, the collection was nice. All the other, do better Nike branded collection that they did was pretty nice. The marketing campaign I thought was pretty interesting. They had Earl sweatshirt, like the focus in the photo shoot in the initial photos that came out, and not the Avi Gold guy. And one of my main talking points on this podcast is that if you are a brand or store owner, the owner or the face of the brand has to be out there front and center. In my opinion, this Avi Gold guy should have been out there telling his story of who he is and, his OG status and why he's got this collab. Instead, they had Earl sweatshirt out there and they had other like commercials and stuff. And so obviously it's a choice, but as I said, he's not really that wide known outside of the Toronto circle. And this is the opportunity to let people know who you are. But, that's his choice. They're allowed to do whatever type of marketing campaign they want. That's just my thoughts on it. And, sometimes when you're doing analysis about something, about a product, you end up being kind of arguing about marketing or what kind of marketing someone should do. What I'm trying to say is this is what some brand could be doing, because if you look around and see what's working and where the trends are going and what connects with the next generation, it's a name and a face, and not how things were with a nameless Palace and a nameless Supreme. Other sneakers that have been kind of in the news have been the Puma Halliburton that was announced, his signature shoe, because Indiana Pacers and Oklahoma Thunder are in the NBA Finals. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has a Converse collab as well too. And it seems like both those sneakers are not really ready to be sold right now. Another thing, it'd be great if you could sell some right now and capitalize on the moment. Oftentimes, a lot of those sneakers come out in September or so because that's when kids are buying them for the school season or college or whatever it is. And the Halliburton one is designed by Salehi Bembury, I think, because it's got his like fingerprint thing on the side. Honestly, the fingerprint thing looks like just like a ball sack to me now anytime I see it. Hey, look, my signature design language is a wrinkled dry ball sack. If you think of wrinkled dry ball sacks, think of Salehi Bembury. And I know he's got more shoes coming out with Puma. Good luck to him. Good luck to Salehi Bembury selling his ball print Pumas. And also leading into the NBA Finals, SGA had like this Converse ad after they dispatched of Anthony Edwards and the Minnesota Timberwolves, where the ad was an ant walking around in sand. Then you see a footprint and there's no ant or anything. And I was like, obviously it was a shot at Ant Edwards, that you've got rid of Ant Edwards. And shit talking in ads is fine. Anthony Edwards has done that. I think is fine. This ad, if you watched it, when I first watched it, it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't even realize that it signified that he's stepped on the ant, because they don't show it. Maybe for PETA reasons, you can't even kill an ant now, I guess. But they didn't even have like anything to mimic the stepping of the foot. That's probably why I didn't get it. Like if you did this big whoosh sound and then the next shot is the footprint on the sand, that would at least tell you that this ant has been stepped on. Instead, it was just like an ant walking around and then a shoe print. And Jason Tatum, they had the same problem with Jordan Brand having an ad kind of taking a shot at Anthony Edwards. And it said something like, don't stop disbelieving or something. That doesn't even like make sense. Like I have to stop and think about what you're saying here. That's not a good ad in my opinion. In this case, when I'm analyzing marketing, I think it's flipped. I'm not saying you could make sense. I'm saying you should make sense. All right, let's talk about Urban Necessities, TwoJ's kicks, Shoe Surgeon, Nike lawsuit, Sneaker 360 deals, and the guy behind the scenes seemingly pulling the strings. So I'm going to talk about it one by one, and I'm going to try to do my best to make it as clear and as concise as possible. I'm just going to talk about the videos that were put out, the statements that were put out, give my analysis and thoughts on it, and then kind of wrap it all up at the end. So news broke out earlier that Urban Necessities could be on the brink of bankruptcy, and people were imploring consigners to pull out your sneakers. And as I stated in episode 74 of this podcast, when I talked about TwoJ's kicks being kicked out of Urban Necessities, I talked about how the owner of Urban Necessity is a business company of Shoe Surgeon, which I'm going to basically call Surgeon Inc. And that is Dominic Chambroni, who is the shoe surgeon, and Dallas Mbimbo. who is the behind the scenes business partner. And I was one of the first ones to mention Dallas and Bimbo by name in that episode. And he's a guy who's known behind the scenes. I know sneaker blogs and other people are well aware of him, but it's never been really mentioned. It's usually been mentioned as shoe surgeon, which is the confusing part about this, because there's the Surgeon Inc. business, which is the two of them, and there's the actual guy called shoe surgeon. But none of them have really talked about Dallas and Bimbo, the behind the scenes guy. But I did. Hey, so that's why you listen to the SockJig Sneaker Podcast. So the next story that broke was that Nike and Surgeon Inc. have settled their lawsuit. And this was a confidential agreement, but the parts that were disclosed said that Surgeon Inc. has agreed to pay an undisclosed amount to Nike. And I'm saying Surgeon Inc. here because it includes both of them. Both of them were named in the lawsuit. The agreement says that they can't sell Nike products. They can only make special one-of-one unless they have like special circumstances for that. Most likely meaning, hey, if Travis Scott is at a white party or LeBron James needs some sort of anniversary sneakers, then maybe we can call on you to make something for us as a one-of-one. But the rest of the settlement is sealed. And as a reminder, as I said in previous episodes, the gist of that lawsuit was that Nike was accusing Surgeon Inc. of mass trademark infringement, of counterfeiting, not just one-of-one shoe cobbling customs, meaning that they were doing it at a factory scale. It even said that when Dominic hooked up with this Dallas guy, that's when he, quote, transformed into an egregious display of widespread infringement that has even crossed into willful counterfeiting of iconic Nike products, end quote. That was a direct quote from the lawsuit. But in the details that were released, nothing about it said anything about the mass counterfeiting, about what they agreed to on that. Most likely that part was sealed. So look, pretend you're running Nike and you're accusing the Surgeon Inc. of making fakes at scale and that they're ready to deal. Then if you're Nike, you'd be like, tell me what you did to make these fakes. Who did you get to make these fakes? Is it the factory here in LA? Is it in China? Which factories were they? Who did you deal with? And then you take all that information that you have of factories making fakes of Nike products, and then you give it to the feds, who are continuing their investigation on mass counterfeiting and fakes and money laundering and all that stuff. And then also you'd say, hey, we have this cash settlement that we're going to get. Let's take a look at your finances. It says here you own Urban Necessities. Let's check the books on that. Because in Urban Necessities, you've made custom shoe surgeon products exclusively for that store. So that's my guess of what's in that sealed part. It's about the fakes. It's about the details of what's going on in Urban Necessities. But there's no way to know because it's sealed. So the key point there you got to remember is that the Surgeon Inc. company has to pay a big amount to Nike. Actually, it doesn't say small or big. It just says undisclosed amount. We can assume it's a big amount. Let's say it's $1 million. Maybe it's $100,000. It's probably not like $5,000. So we know that the Urban Necessity stores owned by Surgeon Inc. is having money problems, and that Surgeon Inc. also owes Nike a lump sum money. So those are two key facts that are related. And then the next story was broke that was when TwoJ's Kicks finally broke his silence because consigners are going after him saying, hey, when are we going to get our money? You have never said anything about what happened or why you left or put any statement out. Maybe there was an NDA, maybe not, I don't know. And I've joked about that he signed basically a 360 deal. But before I talk about that, did Dominic Chambroni, did he sign a 360 deal with this Dallas and Bimbo guy? Is he also in like a bad deal with Dallas and Dallas is basically running the show? Like Dallas is really Shoe Surgeon Inc. and he's like this helpless guy who can't do anything even though his name is on everything? Or is Dominic an active participant in all this alongside Dallas? And I don't know. It's unclear. I don't know if he's helpless and can't do anything about it. I don't know if he's actively shoulder to shoulder with Dallas and Bimbo putting the screws to TwoJ's Kicks. So that's where it gets to TwoJ's Kicks and him posting a 14-minute video detailing his side on what happened with this deal and where he is right now. And I'll try to like recap it as concise as possible. I'll try to like give a director's commentary where I cut in and give my thoughts. He starts off the video talking about how his wife has cancer. You know, best wishes to her. I hope she is able to get through that and to beat cancer. And so 2J's talks about how that's been his focus. And then he talks about how early on he started talking to Dominic and Dallas at a sneaker con about a potential partnership between Urban Necessities and the Surgeon Inc. business. And that was to help him run the store and also to scale it up as well. And at this point, it's unclear if the Urban Necessities business has been run well by 2J's Kicks or if the books have been cooked or doctored or whatever. What we do know is that they were already in Caesar's Palace. They do already have an agreement with American Eagle. And at this time, we do know that consignors were being paid. But in terms of what's on the books of assets and debts, it's unclear and no real way for the public to know at this point. And then 2J said that they worked together for months without a deal and just a handshake agreement. And a red flag here, as any lawyer will probably tell you, that this is a bad idea, just working on a handshake agreement for months. What really happened here in these months? Like, what did Dallas and Dom and Surgeon Inc. learn? Did they look at the books and say, hey, this is a great business. They're making a ton of money here. They're moving a ton of product. There's a sneaker boom happening right now. We can make a lot of money by scaling this up, by also bringing in Surgeon Inc. We have these mass production of Nike products. Remember, at this point, they're not being sued by Nike. We have all these shoe surgeon Nike customs made at factories, and we can bring them into this store and move a ton of product. Or when looking at the books and working with 2J's Kicks, did they see, hey, this business is kind of cooked. There's a lot of debts here. We'd be taking on that debt. Maybe we should write up an agreement where he keeps all the debts that he had before we got on board. So they apparently write up this agreement, and 2J's Kicks in November 2022 signs this deal apparently, and he gets paid out. He gets paid out apparently a lump sum of around 4.5 million. That's what he said on IG Live. I couldn't exactly rewind at the time to look back at it. But he said in his original video that he bought a couple properties and took care of friends and family. And it's like, oh, that's nice. You got a nice deal. I'm sure you had it fully reviewed by lawyers and that explained everything with you. And you took that big chunk of money and they were able to put it to your wife's health and take care of your family and stuff, your parents. That's great. That's great to hear. What's that? You didn't have it reviewed by a lawyer? You didn't read it? Are you fucking crazy? What are you doing? Because that's apparently what happened. He says that only 8 months later did he find out that he actually has no operational control, that he's essentially signed it all over to them, and he's been converted from owner to founder, and he's essentially an employee. And that his wife and himself still have personal liability on the business and on the taxes that are owed. When I saw that part of the video, I was like, what? Why would you sign that? That doesn't make any sense at all. So remember, he said November 2022 is when he signed the deal. 8 months later is when he figured this out. November to and 8 months is June 2023 is when he figures this out. So he did not actually say June 2023. He said 8 months later. But then he did go on to say in May of 2023, so rewind a bit, that's when he's in the phase where he doesn't realize that he's been snowed over and has no control. He says that his wife allowed Urban Necessities to borrow $300,000 to buy product and do licensing deals abroad. And that this has been agreed to be paid back, but hasn't been paid, and he doubts it ever will. And he does say that he disagrees with lending them $300,000, but he goes ahead with it anyways. Essentially, he says his wife did it. The licensing deals they're talking about there is most likely the Saudi Arabia store. There's a store in Saudi Arabia, Riyadh, that is Urban Necessities Riyadh, that they were opening like January 2023, which is in this window where he has sold the company to them, but doesn't realize that he's no longer has any operational control. Okay, then cut to later, then he finds out that Urban Necessities is making consignment policy changes, and then he wants to be bought out. They won't let him. He negotiates with them. It comes to a certain agreement. He signs the paperwork and they don't. And then they keep coming back and lowering the number. At this point, you got to think, if you're a Surgeon Inc., you would know that you can probably take the screws to this guy, that he signs deals without reading them. Or that they know that they already got the fish on the line, that he's already been hooked by the last deal that he signed. And so why would you let the fish loose? That fish is liable for a big chunk of debts. Why would I want to take on those debts? And then TwoJ says that he's finally terminated as an employee, but he's still on the books, still on the line, and still liable for some debts and taxes that are owed. And then I guess he starts negotiating with them to let him walk away for $0. You can have everything. I walk away from this and you guys keep Urban Necessities. I'm done with it completely. But they won't let him go. They don't sign that deal because probably if you have a fish on the line that's liable for a big chunk of debt, why would you let that fish go for $0? And now potentially Urban Necessities is nearing bankruptcy, allegedly, and they could be potentially screwing over their consigners, allegedly. Let me keep adding potentially and allegedly over and over. And this is happening at the same time that Surgeon Inc. is negotiating with Nike and settling the deal. That's why I said the two things are connected. They want to clear their debts because they got to pay Nike whatever lump sum that they got to pay them. At the same time, TwoJ's Kicks is still on the line, and the feds, they go and seize his accounts because tax debts are still owed. And according to the books, he's the one liable for them because that's the deal that he signed. And so he's now, the rest of the video talks about how he wants to do the right thing. He wants ownership back of the brand, and he wants to pay consigners back all their money because, you know, he wants to stand on his word that he's good business, that he is someone you could trust. So after that 14-minute video, the next day, basically, there were some comments made from the Surgeon Inc. on Instagram, which were deleted later, which said, quote, "Why don't you tell them about how many millions you got paid and what kind of salary you were making?" End quote. And then over the weekend, there was a full PR statement put out by Surgeon Studios. And it was kind of an odd statement. I'll try to summarize it. It basically said that, you know, we invested in good faith. We invested millions with this guy. The business faced some serious challenges. And then they say that TwoJ's Kicks mishandled funds and taxes, and they only found out afterwards. And then I guess when you're saying that you found out afterwards, I guess that means that they're saying that we didn't do our due diligence either. And then it says TwoJ's Kicks engaged in self-dealing, stole product, and embezzled company funds. So if this guy stole all this money, shouldn't you be going to the feds? Shouldn't police be involved? Like, something there does not add up. And so the missing pieces in this, I believe, are the American Eagle deal with Urban Necessities and the Saudi Arabia store. The American Eagle deal happened in like March 2019, and it said in the article at the time, it's in Forbes magazine, that American Eagle even took an ownership stake. It wasn't just a leasing thing. They took an ownership stake in Urban Necessities to help fund its growth. This is March 2019. Everyone is talking about Gen Z and sneaker boom happening. So where that currently stands, I'm not sure. This American Eagle deal, this was done before Dallas and Bimbo, Surgeon Inc. got involved because they didn't get involved until 2022. Then the other part of it is the Saudi Arabia store, which opened in January 2023. And this is what was been talked about as a licensing deal and not an ownership stake. So I think these two key deals, one happening before Surgeon Inc. came on board and one happening in that grace period in between where TwoJ's Kicks was unaware that he's basically got no more control. From the American Eagle deal, if that happened earlier, was that money pocketed and not put on the books properly and Surgeon Inc. did not know that or did not see it or it wasn't fully done? I don't know. I'm just speculating. And then the other one is the Saudi Arabia one. Surgeon Inc. basically accused him of doing side deals. Is that the one that they did a side deal on? So, TwoJ's Kicks, his side is basically, hey, my wife has cancer, and here this Dallas and Bimbo and Dominic guy are sharks, and they smelled blood, and they found a mark like me, and they took advantage of me. I'm just an innocent guy who doesn't read contracts, and then they saddled me with all the debt. Everything was good before they got here. I don't know what they're doing now. And this Dallas guy, he does what he does with all his businesses. He pillages them and strips them of assets, and he's the bad guy, not me. And now I'm stuck on it because I signed a bad deal. And now, because I'm such a good person, the only thing I want to do is do the right thing and pay back all the consigners. And the Surgeon Inc. side is basically, hey, this guy ran this business to the ground. That's why he needed help. He was probably cooking the books of this consignment shop and hid it from us. And when we saw the books, we saw all these debts and we were like, why should we be saddled with his debts? Let him be liable for those debts. So we wrote it up. We got our lawyer to write that up and he signed on the dotted line. And then when we find out he's possibly doing deals with Saudi Arabia and American Eagle on the side and keeping that money from us. So that was me trying to summarize what essentially it appears that each side is saying. And it's really hard to know the details of really who said what and who agreed to what. I'm perfectly fine not knowing the details. How am I supposed to know who agreed to what and who was scheming to do what and who is a shark and who's a victim in this thing? But most likely, it seems like there was probably just bad business on both sides, at which point they probably deserve each other. What we do know is that the Surgeon Inc. has to pay Nike, so they probably got to wipe out whatever debts they have so they can pay Nike. And on TwoJ's side, no matter how you cut it, he signed a bad deal. If you sign a bad deal, that's on you. If you don't have a lawyer review things and explain that legal jargon to you, that's on you. But at the same time, I don't really buy all this TwoJ's Kicks is an innocent lamb story either, because there's missing pieces to his story. Maybe he realized along the way, hey, I should have read that deal. This deal's fucked up. Maybe now, to get back, I'll start doing some side deals and cash out and, protect myself. That's what I mean, that maybe it was both sides scheming at the same time, allegedly. Again, this is just all me saying allegedly. And TwoJ's Kicks wanting to pay back consigners, is admirable if that's what he truly believes, if he actually does that. But every consigner there is essentially a reseller. They're trying to get the most from their sneakers. And as I've been saying, you can treat resellers, you can treat sneakerheads like shit. PayPal did that. When buyers are buying sneakers from Zeta Kicks, PayPal said these guys are all resellers. We don't have to give them the PayPal guarantee. We don't have to return that money to them. It's a victimless crime. So it's admirable that he wants to pay back the consigners. I don't really believe it. I assume he wants to protect his name. He wants to protect the trust that he's built. At this point, that kind of is all shot, isn't it? The name Urban Necessities and trust don't really go together. I wouldn't be shocked if like a GoFundMe was set up. Can you spare a quarter for a helpless reseller trying to pay back other resellers who are just trying to sell their Yeezy Zions at Urban Necessities? Please, any dime, any dollar you send counts. That's going to be a tough sell if your whole entire persona was about projecting wealth and hype. So he wants to pay the consigners back. I get it. I understand it. I don't believe it, but I understand it. He wants the company back. That part, like, why? You want the Urban Necessities name, but none of its previous debts? That's essentially what Dallas and Bimbo and Dominic Giambroni did to you. So it's like you want the same thing now done to them? I just don't see it. At this point, I don't know. I think it should be just buried and dead. Of course, it sucks that all these consigners could potentially lose their money, and hopefully somewhere along the line something could be done. Some sort of assets are sold off. Maybe all that marble in the store is sold off to pay off the debts, pay off some of these consigners. But if it was me, and I'm trying to say this respectfully, so I won't even say it for him. I'll just say that if it was me, I would just be focusing on your wife, man. Focus on her health. Try to get out of this situation. I wouldn't worry about consigners. I would put the blame back on Urban Necessities. Hey, I got tricked into this. Urban Necessities, you guys pay the consigners. That's the part that doesn't like fully make sense to me, that why he wants to personally go in and pay these consigners. I get it, what he said. His name is his most important thing. But when you got a sick wife, health is kind of the most important thing. Again, I'm trying to say that respectfully. I'm sure he is taking care of his wife. There was a reply from a No Good Tweets, who ironically had a good tweet. He said, quote, 90% of his problems could have been avoided if Americans just had free healthcare. So that's the story as I saw it. There's many parts where I was trying to just piece things together and I was editorializing and giving my opinion. If anything I said was wrong, it was by accident. This is a complicated story to kind of put together. And as I said, there's details that are just going to be impossible to know. So it's always going to be one side said versus the other side said, unless all those documents are revealed in a court of law. But overall, something seems off. Probably bad business on both sides. Allegedly. Brendan Dunne is leaving Complex, and my disclaimer is, in case you haven't heard, I've settled the beef with Complex. So anything I'm going to talk about here, it's not through the prism of a beef. I'm just going to share my thoughts on him leaving and the sneaker media industry itself. And his announcement post about it said, quote, decided 2 weeks back after almost 11 years in that it was time to leave Complex. And he goes on to, say thank people and stuff. But first off, when I read that, I was like, 2 weeks is probably when you gave your notice. So it's got to have been earlier than that. It was time to go. But where's he going? I don't know. Most people's popular guess is that he's going to go to Nike. And I asked around, and the people that I talked to said that he's not going to Nike. But even then, they can't confirm. It's just a guess. I know that he's really into running. And so maybe the thought is he'd go to like a running sneaker company and do marketing or something for him. So that means that he would leave the media side and going into, the product side. So that is one guess. The other guess is that he stays in media, that he goes to some competition. He's heading up sneakers at The Ringer or Barstool, in which case he's, creating a whole new vertical to compete with Complex. And maybe that's where he's going. I don't see it just because where's the money? It's a tough time in media. I'm not sure who would want to create like an entire sneaker vertical at this point. Sneakers are just a little bit too niche, and there's not really a sneaker boom or anything happening. All these like blogs and stuff in terms of making money, it was a lot of affiliate links is how they would make money through, articles and stuff that they post or releases and release schedules. But website visits are way down, like across the board. The Google AI at the top is, taken away from search traffic. And I personally think that content sites as we know them will not even exist in 5 years in the format that they are right now. Everything is just going to apps, to Instagram and vertical videos and YouTube, I guess. And I joked on Twitter that maybe Brendan Dunne was like, doing these Nike country videos dressed like a cowboy with the belt buckle and stuff and said, you know what? It's time for me to leave. I'm not made for doing vertical videos. It's tough being in your mid to late 30s and having to learn how to do vertical videos. And I'm talking about myself there. That's why I'm not doing them. I'm in my mid to late 40s, though, not my mid to late 30s. So if it's a tough time in media, that means it's time to leave. But it poses an interesting question for Complex. Like, what are they going to do? Brendan Dunne did a lot for them. His title, I think, was head of sneakers. In terms of hierarchy, I think only Joe LaPuma was head of him. But also he was their primary sneaker reporter. No offense to anyone else there, but they don't really have reporting chops without him. Others either write their opinion pieces or others just post whatever sneaker news is happening that day. The Grape Fives are coming back, things like that. So it doesn't seem like anyone else there is in the role of breaking sneaker news. So I'm not even sure if they're going to replace him, if they're going to get someone else to fill that role. So I'm not sure if the current staff that they have, someone there will fill that role and be the new sneaker reporter, or if they fill it at all, if they just leave it open. Will they just do uncredited reports on their main Complex Sneakers Twitter accounts like they did when they said that the Tokyo 5s are not releasing? But Brendan Dunne was also a key on their Complex Sneaker podcast, and, Joe LaPuma's the host, Brendan Dunne is the investigative reporter, and Welty is the opinion guy. And so without him, it's the host and the opinion guy. And so the mix is off. It's just a little bit different. So I assume they would bring in someone else, maybe guest stars for a bit, or maybe Trinidad James or something. I'm not sure if he'd be in a position to do it full time. So I'm not sure what Complex will do. I know there's a lot of people on sneaker Twitter whose dream it is to be paid by either Nike or Complex to talk about sneakers. And it just feels like such a gone away world. It seems like those jobs do not exist. It's harder than ever to get those jobs. And here's an example where there's a vacancy, and we'll see if they fill the vacancy or will they just create more bubblegum, empty calorie content because it gets the same number of views and post more AI, ASMR type of videos. So we'll see, but happy trails to Brendan Dunne and kudos on a job done. I mentioned it briefly there about Tokyo 5's releasing, and I wanted to almost as a footnote talk about it now because things are a little bit different with Brendan Dunne leaving. But what happened was early in January of this year, Sneaker Market Romania posted a description of an Air Jordan 5 yellow/multicolor, and it said expected to release in September 2025. And then later there was a follow-up tweet saying, would you like to see the Tokyo 5's return? And When sneaker leaker accounts post this kind of stuff, and Z does it sometimes as well too. Sometimes it's to tease upcoming releases. Maybe it's to like guess that the yellow Air Jordan 5 is going to be Tokyo. Maybe they know, maybe they don't know, maybe they have incomplete data and they're just, posting it out there that, hey, potentially these could release soon. And so then in May, Z Sneakerheads posted that, hey, the Tokyo 5s are returning. And, the usual Grail talk happened about, should they come back? Should we tell news stories? I'm not here to talk about that kind of stuff. We've talked about that before. But then a few days later, Complex said, there are no plans for the Tokyo Air Jordan 5 Retro. Sources close to Jordan brand tell Complex. And what's notable here is they were posted on the Complex Sneakers Twitter account and not Brendan Dunne's. So looking back at that now, it's like maybe that's when Brendan Dunne gave his notice that, he's going to be leaving soon. And then why post like big news on someone's account who's going to be leaving? So maybe that's why they posted on the Complex Sneakers account. Maybe the info came not from Brendan Dunne, but from someone else. That part, I don't know. But what is notable is Complex hasn't really been in the game of leaking Jordan brand info. That's more of Z and Sneaker Files and occasionally like Soul Retriever or even like Soul Savvy. If you've ever seen Brendan Dunne's account, he'll post like Nike news that ACGs are coming back, or Cortez has a shoe coming out, or Bodhi has an Astro Grabber. And those are usually done on Brendan Dunne's personal account in the past. But then the very next day, Brendan Dunne on his personal account quote tweeted the Complex one and said, "We got this wrong. We reached out to Jordan Brand directly about the Tokyo 5s returning, and they told us it was not happening. They have since changed their story and confirmed the sneakers coming back." And they added that always respect to Z Sneakerheads for the scoops. So what was interesting about that whole time was when Complex said that Tokyo 5s are not returning, a lot of people were like, I trust Z. I think I'm going to go by him. So you have like this account with 1 million followers saying this shoe is not returning. But people are like, nah, I trust Z over this because Z has the track record to back him up. So then a few days later, Complex posted another update saying they got some more information about the release, that it's happening in September, that there's 20,000 pairs. And there was even like quotes from someone at Jordan Brand, not named or anything, but this is all on the Complex Sneakers account about the shoes coming back and the yellow toe cap and stuff. And even the same day, Soul Retriever got some information about more grails coming back. So looking at it, it was just interesting to me. It's like, hey, is Jordan Brand trying to get Z out of here? They're not happy that he released this information. But then why would they like tell Complex no and then later, all right, oh fuck, we gave you bad info. Let's make it up and give you direct quotes and even give you like stock numbers and stuff as like a make good. So I don't know if there really is a turf war going on about sneaker leaking. It sounds so ridiculous saying that out loud, but it really is a thing, as I've talked about in previous episodes. But we'll see how this all changes with Brendan Dunne leaving Complex. It's like there have no other reporter of note for this kind of stuff. So will there just be more scoops on the Complex Sneakers account that are unnamed, uncredited? I don't know. But overall, it was a huge egg on the face of Complex, I thought, because Z has never gotten something wrong at this level of scale. He has never posted, hey, this huge grail is coming back, and then it doesn't come back. Sure, there's been like things wrong about a colorway. I remember something about a Jordan 2, like the back heel had a different color. Things like that, or stuff that is delayed or canceled. But those are usually like just random sneakers that not of note, that are not at the level of a grail. Like I said, my disclaimer applies. I'm not trying to do this through my prism of my previous beef. I'm just trying to analyze the situation as I saw it. And as I've said before, trust is the most important thing you need to have, a value that should be at the top of the list for anyone in business or anyone providing information. So shout out to Z Sneakerheads, shout out to Sneaker Files, shout out to previous guests Brandonian and Sneaker Market Romania, all the people who are out there building trust and releasing reliable sneaker information. The rest of the episode is dedicated to listener questions, so thank you very much for everyone who sent in a question on Instagram, Twitter, and email. This was the first time I've ever asked for people to send in questions. I always thought that if I'm going to do a solo podcast, I should have enough topics on my own to talk about on the podcast and not have to do listener questions. But I'm happy to do it now, and you can still submit questions. You can email me at sockjig@gmail.com. You can DM me on Twitter and on Instagram at sockjig, and I'll try to collect them all up and answer them on a future episode. Include your name, include your city if you want. You can even record it and email it to me. That makes it better for audio podcasts. But either way, I appreciate you listening and I appreciate you sending in a question. And first off, there was a few people who asked, when is the next sock drop? This came from Action Jackson, Going Back to My Ways, and dadshoe.jpg. Those three people asked that question, and I really do promise that it's soon. The tariff stuff is really to blame. I was going to kick it back in February or so, but then with all this tariff stuff and how transporting most of the socks from Canada to the US, is that going to be a problem? I think it should be okay. My socks are not made in China. They're made in the Philippines. So it should be okay. And I'm hoping to restart it very soon and go back to small batch numbers. All right, first question came from Scott Powers. And this was actually the question that inspired me to open it up and ask anyone to send in a question. And so thank you, Scott. Scott writes about the Chicago Blackhawks for The Athletic. And he also has a podcast called Powers and Laz, a podcast mainly about the Chicago Blackhawks. And as a Vancouver Canucks fan myself, the Chicago Blackhawks are forever a mortal enemy, even if that feud has kind of died down in the last decade or so. But Scott's question is about New Balance and New Balance quality, and he asks, what's stopping New Balance from making a similar quality shoe as a general release instead of collaborating with Jound, for example? I get that Jound Connection gets more eyes on it and drives up the secondary price, but it's also a shoe that is superior to what New Balance normally sells, at least from a colorway perspective. Is it that the shoe is too expensive to make at a given rate? Does New Balance lack the creativity to pull off the same shoe? I'm sure New Balance wants hot collabs, but don't you want to sell a mass amount of shoes? I feel like a New Balance shoe like this would pop regardless of its collab, but maybe I'm wrong. Great question, and first I'll talk about collabs. Collabs can bring in a new audience, which comes up in another question later. And brands, of course, want new eyes and new customers on their product. In terms of monitoring the resale price, I'm sure brands do this. They probably have a KPI for it for some collabs where they might expect the resale price to be there. They might not expect it from every single drop. But if they have a drop where there's 1,000, 2,000 pairs and it's a hyped collaborator, then they might be keeping an eye on it. It's just human nature to want to track that, but probably doesn't factor into the product vision and the story that they're trying to tell with the sneaker and the collaborator. But otherwise, New Balance really does have pretty good quality on their GRs. A GR version of a 992 is most likely great quality. A GR version of a 574 is not going to be in the same leagues as the 992. So they, of course, have tiers for the types of releases that they have, some for the general consumer and some for the more serious buyer. But the answer is most likely margins. For GRs, they want margins. If you're going to make a lot of pairs, you want to make a good margins on those pairs. Those are for a certain audience that is price conscious, and often they have a target retail price. So say New Balance says we want to sell this sneaker for $140 max. That means you might have to make the shoe for $40. That's their cost of it. So if you wanted thick suede on that sneaker, you can't do that for $40 for your cost. You have to go with a cheaper material, maybe a synthetic material to hit that target. They obviously could make a super good quality version, but a GR consumer most likely would not want to pay $250 retail for that. But a sneakerhead would. So when it comes to releases targeted towards sneakerheads like Collabs, the nature of limited releases and collabs lends itself to higher prices and therefore higher quality. They know that the stock number is going to be lower, so it's going to be, fine to go on and make a big order for thick suede. They know that they can charge a higher price for sneakerheads, and they know there might not be that many margins on these as there are on GRs because the intent is to bring in a new audience. It's almost like treating it like a marketing project. The example is that first Salehi Bembury New Balance sneaker, the 2002R, the orange one. Not that many people knew Salehi Bembury as a household name at that point. And I have that sneaker and it's got great suede on it. And I have not seen that kind of suede on any other GR version of the 2002R. In terms of color palettes and what they reserve for collaborators, I'm sure they do. I'm sure Mushroom is reserved for Jound as long as they have a partnership with Jound. I'm sure Teddy Santis being there has like a say on the types of color palettes that he wants to work with. And maybe even Joe Freshgoods has a reservation on the pink colorways. Because you wouldn't want customers to say, hey, why would I buy this collab pink Joe Freshgoods sneaker when they have the exact same colorway on sale right now? So that goes against your attempt to create energy and hype. So the Teddy Santis collection that they've done was probably done to like bridge this gap so that you could get collab type of quality and colorways and they're available as a GR. Some of them did really well and sold through while others went on sale. And lastly, the other thing to remember is New Balance is a family-run private business. The founders' family are in key positions in the org chart, and so they sort of operate along the lines like it is a private family business. That means they might not be overly aggressive in terms of expanding internationally and making a ton more factories and having access to more and more material. When you keep it smaller, you keep it tighter, perhaps the range of materials and the numbers that are available to you is lower. So long answer, but most likely the number one answer is because of margins. All right, next question is from email, and it's actually not a question, it's a comment, and it's from Sammy Abrams. He writes, more size 13 takes, please. It's one of the funniest things I've heard in a while related to sneakers. I finally started listening to your podcast, and I'm listening to all of them. I love how you're really in it and know all the small stuff. That's funny to me, end quote. And thank you, Sammy. That's honestly one of the nicest compliments you can give me is saying you like some of the comedy segments I've done before and saying you're listening to the podcast and listening to older episodes and being a new listener. So thank you for taking the time to listen. And that goes for everyone listening right now. So yeah, of course I'll do requests. I haven't done this in a while. I think last time I did it was like episode 50 something. So these are takes that you'd only have if you wear size 13. So hit the music. I'm saying hit the music to myself. So hit the music. Nike has a license to print money if they just retro the Tim Duncan Foamposite Max. I gotta clean my barbecue this weekend. NBA players, they only wear these low tops so they can do the Euro step. Rappers gotta get back to rapping actual bars again. I asked people on Facebook if they could help me get these undefeated 4s. Nothing, no comments at all. You know the game is fucked up when an OG can't even buy a pair to wear. Shedeur Sanders should have been drafted first overall. New Balance, get that shit out of my face. All I know is that if Jordan Brand doesn't get these Aqua 8s right, I want Gentry Humphrey arrested. My wife left me. That was size 13 takes. Those are takes that you'd only have if you wear size 13. No other size. Next up, friend of the show, Corey Whatever, previous guest on the show, Corey Whatever asks, in your opinion, what makes a shoe sneaker of the year? In my opinion, the number one thing is it has to look good. It has to be a fire sneaker. It's got to have a good design. It's got to have good material. All that stuff plays an important part and it just has to look good. There's never going to be a sneaker of the year where just the story is awesome, but the shoe sucks. And speaking of storytelling, the second thing is like, does it connect with you on some level? When Michael Jordan came into the league, he connected with such a huge number of people in their most impressionable years that billions of dollars have been made off that and it's still felt today. And so, of course, the collaborator, the athlete, that has a big part in how it connects with you. And storytelling as well, too. It's like, does it have a good story? Sometimes there is no story, and no story is the story. Sometimes the collaborator is just a story. This is a collab with the Cortez guy or whoever. Some other things that, affect Sneaker of the Year is like, is there something new or innovative about it? Like, is it just a retro of something that just retroed 3-4 years ago? It's not going to qualify. But if it came out like 6+ years ago, 10 years ago, then it could qualify unless there's something else that's newer or better. Like if white cement 3s were just vaulted for 10 years and they came back with the perfect OG version, the 88 kind of version with no yellow midsole or anything, Nike Air on the back, and the quality was great, then it probably could qualify. And even then, if there was something newer or better and it just hit more at a certain level that released that year, then it might beat White Cement 3 that year if that was releasing in this hypothetical year. How sneakers have been releasing has also impacted sneakers, like the Trophy Room Jordan 1 iced out sneaker release, for example, and how all those were backdoored. So making a sneaker too limited or a botch release, all that can take away from a sneaker being considered a sneaker of the year. But one of the things I've been mentioning is like, do a lot of other people agree with you? There's a difference between what your personal sneaker of the year could be and what a consensus is. There could be a big difference between what you think is a sneaker of the year and what a lot of other people think is a sneaker of the year. Do you like it a lot versus do a lot of other people like it a lot too? For example, I could say some random Adidas Spezial sneaker is a sneaker of the year to me. It's fire, it's excellent quality, the leather is really soft. You could even say it's an Oasis collab with Liam Gallagher or whatever, and it's a story of the two brothers getting back together, and under the tongue, it even says like fuck Blur or something. You know, the storytelling is awesome. The quality of the sneaker is awesome. It's super limited because it's a Spezial. Would a lot of other people agree with me? Probably not. So I could say it's my sneaker of the year. A lot of Oasis fans could say it's a sneaker of the year. But for a lot of other sneakerheads, they'd be like, fuck no, isn't Adidas Spezial the sneaker of the year? What the fuck are you talking about? So you can have your personal choice, or you can see what a lot of other people think. And so either or is fine. A sneaker of the year is just the winner of the popularity contest. So of course a consensus is needed for that. Okay, next question from Instagram. Ruben5366 asks, what sneaker did you not like at first but grew on you after release? And my answer to this is basically every New Balance sneaker. I was not really a fan of New Balance sneakers. I had no reason to wear them or try them on. I never grew up with them or anything like that. And it was actually ALD, the ALD 997, the one with the yellow tongue and the pink tongue, that actually did it for me, because I was able to hit on them with the full intention of just reselling them because I don't really care about New Balance. And when I got them in hand, the quality was really nice. I really liked them. They actually even smelled good. Those are the ones with like the floral boxes and everything. And so I just kept them. And then that is why I went on to try other New Balance sneakers. And now, you know, they're really comfortable. I like a lot of the New Balance sneakers that come out. There's still ones I don't care for, like 574 and even the 9060, which I'll talk about soon as well too. But that just shows the power of collabs as well too. Collabs can get a different audience to take a look at your product, to get it in hand, maybe change your mind on it. And that's all I was going to say, is that you can change your mind on sneakers. Things that change, you get older. Maybe you got them, maybe you wore them and they sucked or something, or maybe you got them and they were awesome. They really liked it, like the story I just said. Or the in-hand quality was really different than what you saw on photos. At this day and age, we're looking at photos on our phone all the time on small screens. We're not always going to desktop and blowing up the 4K version of a photo to see what the materials and everything look like. And other people, you know, they've had their mind changed on, you know, really good photography or a really good fit or something. So there's definitely lots of reasons why someone can change their mind on a sneaker. So that leads to the next set of questions, which were about New Balance 9060. One from Aussie Demo on Instagram and Twitter as well too, where he asks, why are people so bothered about what others think about sneakers, i.e. the New Balance 9060? And also Champagne Babsy from Instagram asks, why is Matt Welty a tasteless hater? So this was the topic of the day on Twitter a few weeks ago now, where I think it started from Matt Welty either talking about someone else wearing New Balance or quote tweeting something, but he basically said that the New Balance 9060 is like one of the worst New Balances of all time. And he said something like, you're not allowed to publicly say that without being called a hater because they sold a lot of pairs. And Other people, I think Craig quote tweeted him and said, that's wild because the New Balance 9060 is like one of my favorites or something like that. And Matt Welty quote tweeted that and saying, I genuinely don't care if the 9060 is your New Balance favorite. Love it all you want. And then he, went on to talk about how it doesn't compare to the other 900 series sneakers or something like that. But people saw the screenshots and were reacting to why is this guy not like this sneaker? And, kind of like showing what he was saying, proving what he was trying to say, that you can't publicly say you don't like the sneaker because you get called a hater. And so he's getting called a hater. So my disclaimer is, I'm personally not a fan of the sneaker, but it doesn't bother me at all. Like, I just make jokes about it. I say that it looks like egg cartons or Miss Piggy's hoof or something like that. And I just move on. If people are wearing it, if it's popular, that's great. It's got nothing to do with me because I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to wear it. But people can think and say what they want about a sneaker, about their preferences. I did this whole sneaker taste episode in the archives about this. It was like a full-on deep dive about why and how people like things and how it depends on kind of who you are, your preferences, but also your community and your tribe and kind of what the consensus opinion is. So if a lot of people like this sneaker and if you don't like it, then you are kind of going against your community or tribe. It feels that way. Even if at the end of the day, it's just like a throwaway tweet or thought. But the other thing that could affect that is how people perceive you and also your status within the community. And here's an example where Matthew Welty has a certain level of status because he works for Complex and he's on their shows. And so his opinion on sneakers is perceived different than just an average person talking on their own Twitter about it. But really, at the end of the day, Matt Welty is just saying that he's got a personal opinion about the sneaker. But then people are pushing back at him like, you're a person of certain status. Why can you say that? And I think his response is basically, I'm just a guy with opinion, really. So my answer to all this, my answer to this overall question asked here is that when I see an opinion that I don't like, that I don't share, I try to treat it as entertainment. If it is something funny about it, if there's something I could twist about it, make a joke about it, I'll try to do that on Twitter or make it into a segment here for this podcast. But that's just me as a content creator. As someone who doesn't do any content and you're just like online as a sneakerhead, I would just try to laugh it off. Like, ha ha ha, look at this guy. He's got a bad take. Look at this guy. And I just hope that it's good enough of a bad take that it's entertaining. Sometimes they're just aggravating and it's not good enough to be entertaining. At which point I just scroll. I'm like, okay, I'll just move on to the next thing. Maybe there is something more entertaining on the next scroll. But even if it is aggravating, you can share it in DMs with your friends. You can share it in group chats and you can crack some jokes about it in private. And, I've certainly done that. Everyone does that. I just wouldn't post any of that stuff publicly. It's not worth the hassle for me to start a war on something that would just be a throwaway thought or joke or tweet or whatever, especially about like a New Balance 9060, which I really don't care for at all, meaning that I don't want to spend any more time on it than I already have. So unless, like I said, you have some well thought out thread or take or joke or podcast segment, go ahead. And Welty was sort of doing that. He was kind of comparing it to the 900 series and how it's different and how that sneaker stands out because they brought in a different audience and all that stuff. He had a certain point of it, and Twitter is not really the best place for these kind of long form thoughts with lots of context. So that might not have been a satisfying answer. I'm not trying to be an apologist or anything, especially for Complex. It's fine to not like a shoe. Sometimes you just have to be careful on how you word things. And as I said before, when I'm personally trying to be careful about what I say, I save it for the podcast where I can provide more context. But overall, I'm not against bad takes. It makes things entertaining. All right, next question. I'll try to do a few shorter questions here. From Instagram, Veer asks, is it a good time to put some money on Nike Inc? And disclaimer, I do not give financial advice, but in general, just looking at it from a business point of view, I've said before, Nike's a warship. They're turning the warship around. They got steered in the wrong direction by McKinsey. They paid them millions of dollars to give them advice, and then they probably paid them more millions to undo all that advice, and now they're turning it around. It takes a long time to turn that warship around. And they got to do a bunch of painful stuff like no more discounts and no more sale coupons and raise prices, and they raise prices seemingly across the board by like $5 or $10. But it's also a time where people are just being a bit more careful with their money, rightfully so. And maybe you don't want to pay $200 for that DN8. That's a good decision to make. Why would you? But if you believe in buy low, sell for more than pay, and you're a long-term investor, whatever it is, and you were just counting on that the warship will turn around, that's up to you. That's your decision to make. Next question from Twitter, goddammit, Matt asks, what's the most interesting or believable collab you can think of that Kith won't do? Ronnie posted this screenshot on his Instagram stories. I think he was like replying to someone making fun of him doing the Superman collab. Ronnie basically replied to him saying, the brand will always be a representation of what he loves. And that means like his nostalgia from his life, from a kid or teen or as an adult with like Giorgio Armani or whatever. So you most likely won't see him doing collabs with Pokemon or Dragon Ball Z or SpongeBob or something, because that is like later generation stuff. You're more likely to see him do like collabs with like Hanna-Barbera, Yogi Bear, Snap, Crackle, and Pop, that 80s, 90s kind of stuff that he's probably more likely have some sort of nostalgia for. In other stuff, when it comes to like world affairs or politics or just like human rights and things like that, Ronnie, how do I say this carefully? Ronnie has a certain world point of view, and I don't think he'll be doing like a Greta Thunberg collab any day soon. And I'll leave it right there before my podcast equipment like has an EMP hit it all of a sudden. And finally, a Kith Jordan brand collab seems unlikely at this point. It doesn't seem like there is a connection there, but honestly, that kind of stuff can change with like one hire. All of a sudden, they hire someone you're super close to, and then 18 months later, there's a collab coming out. I'm sure it takes a lot more than that. It takes actual Michael Jordan to decide that kind of stuff, but that's why I say never, because people move, people change jobs, and doors can close and doors can open. From Instagram, Maryland Collector asks, have you been following the latest Pokemon boom? And when these booms are happening, do you jump in or do you watch from the sidelines? Or do you not even hear about them? I do not follow Pokemon at all. I graduated high school in 95. I was in university in like 97, 98 when all this stuff came out. It was just way too late for me to get into kiddie stuff. I grew up with like Bugs Bunny cartoons, and then that next generation grew up with Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z and all that kind of stuff. So it is not my generation at all. Which, if you've heard me talk about this in the past, is why I don't believe Daniel Arsham is into Pokemon, because that guy is my age. You were doing other things. Being a fan and a fanatic was not the same thing in like 1997 or 98 or whenever this Pokemon stuff came out. So not really, especially if it's not of my generation. I only do things that are of my generations. There was a time where I was into cards and comics when I was really young. I just don't have the time and energy to be into more than one hobby at a time. Being into sneakers and having a sneaker podcast is enough for me. And if you're going to get into some hobby, you're going to have to learn it really well, especially to ride these like waves. If I were into Pokemon and like I went to the store and got a box and someone would be like, you just bought the regular version, bro. You didn't buy like the Super Nintendo refractor version that you were supposed to get that sells for $2,000 on StockX. And I'd be like, oh, fuck. I didn't know the difference. I just bought the fucking GR Pokemon. This has ruined my day. But if you're really into it, that's what these hobbies should be like. You should be able to really get into it, have some fun, ride these waves, ride these booms, if that's what's going on. Next question is from my nephew Jaspreet in Toronto. And funny story, I don't really talk about my sneaker podcast with family and extended family at all. It's never come up in conversations with family and stuff. So I'm not sure how he found out or how he did, but he found out and he's really proud of me and he's listening. So thank you again, Jaspreet. And don't tell anyone, please don't tell your mom. So Jaspreet asks, is there a shoe that is never released, but if given the chance would drop on sneaker culture at the wrong time? In terms of mythical sneakers that haven't dropped, there's canceled pairs like the Freddy Krueger SBs, but those could come back at any time and it would be a big deal. But really, Nike is kind of doing this whole bringing grails back that never really dropped properly or only were really samples. That seems to be the theme of this last year, and I'm not sure how longer it's going to go on for. The only other mythical shoe that kind of qualifies for this question is the Jordan Airship, where that was a sneaker that Jordan first wore. There's only grainy photos of it. The actual sample was never available. And then it like just turned up like a few years ago. And then it was like sold and even like retroed. And I remember some Italian shop had like 800 pairs of it or so. And then more airships came out. I think like Ama Manier and others had a few collabs and stuff. But really, those types of sneakers, the Converse Weapon, the Nike Airship, were kind of like an end of an era for those types of sneakers. And then the Jordan 1 was really the one that kind of ushered in the new era. Next question from Twitter. Kova asks, it's still a mystery as to what happened to the Coral Studios Air Max 95 and what Ishtrarore, I don't know if I pronounced that right, Ish did with them, though one could assume. So, if you don't know what the Coral Studios Air Max 95 is, it was announced on this Coral Studios Instagram account 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago now. It's like this colorful black, blue, red Air Max 95 that looked nice, that was supposed to release. And they said on his Instagram that it was going to release, but it never really did. So my guess is that it was never really intended to release. It's just always supposed to be a friends and family only release. And so in the past, I know when Adidas has done these friends and family type of drops with like Metalwood or Throwing Fits, it's usually limited to like 200 pairs. That's usually like the minimum order quantity. So either it was like a super limited release, and as he's kind of alluding to, was just backdoored to friends and consignment shops or whatever, or it was never really intended to release, but he still wanted to flex like it was going to release. And I don't know. I know like Joe LaPuma has a pair. I think he's worn it once or twice on sneaker shopping. And, he's in charge of a big sneaker media company. People should go ask him to report on this kind of stuff. But what was he going to say? I got like a pair as friends and family. So at the end of the day, that's really the answer. It was most likely a friends and family drop. I don't know if there's 200. I don't know if they just made like 15 samples and that's all it was. But the guy wanted to flex and he got to flex and his friends got sneakers. That's all it was. Next question is from Dropkicks, who asks about sneaker raffles, and he shares a story that a store manager asked him to see the shoe off his foot to verify the size that he was entering. And he says that's when he knew that things had gone too far. So he asked me, do you have any wild sneaker raffle stories? Only interesting raffle story that I probably have is like Yeezy 350 time. That was a different era. Every store would get like 18 pairs, 20 pairs. And I fit a size 13 in those Yeezys. And I remember I would drive like 35 minutes to like the biggest Foot Locker there is in the Vancouver area, enter my size for size 13 in Yeezys, and only later finding out that, they would only ever get like one pair of size 13 and Yeezys at the time, cause every store would only get like a size run or two, and that the manager was size 13. So anyone who was entering a size 13, you weren't going to get shit. So eventually, I figured that out. I found that out, and then I stopped entering. And now just the thought of like driving 35 minutes to enter a raffle is not something I would do at all. It is just a different era now. Overall, my approach to sneakers is I don't want stress from it. I want it to be a fun hobby. Anything that is stress-inducing, I do not do. I do not do campouts. I don't do lineups. I don't do long lines for raffles. I don't want to sell my sneakers on Facebook or meet people in parking lots or, have them shipped to me. I will ship to them at the same time. All that is a stress for me. I don't want to like check for fakes. I'll let the apps do it. I'll just pay for the privilege of StockX or GOAT verifying that they're not fakes. This is why you never see me selling sneakers on my Twitter. I probably could get rid of a lot of my sneakers on Twitter and make more money there than I could on the apps. But I just don't want the stress of it. I'd rather it be stress-free. Next question is sort of related to that. It's Risky Pugga on Twitter asks, why do we support greedy resellers when they're partially responsible for scarcity? They literally offer no added value to the products they scalp, yet their markups are often double. Okay, the answer to this is kind of what I was just talking about, stress, is that do not let resellers or boogeymen stress you out. Don't let it bother you. I don't want the stress of being bothered by resellers. So they don't bother me at all. I don't want to be worried about people and calling them scalpers. Is that even a PC term? Is the concept of something being a PC term even exist anymore? I don't know, but I really don't look down on resellers. They're easy enough to like ignore and avoid the last few years because everything has been available. There's only been like a few key sneakers that have resold, and if you didn't get those, there are still plenty of other good sneakers. And as people's collections grow, there's also a less of a need to buy every single thing. Not everyone, of course, but like if you didn't get the white cement 4 this last time, but you got it in 2016, it was easy enough to avoid. And another reason I don't worry about resellers at all is that they will always exist. There'll always be people looking to buy something from a reseller. And that's because there will always be people who don't have the time but have the money. They don't want to stand in lineups. They don't want to wait for shipping. They want it now, or they won't be online during the day for a drop. Or if they're in New York City, they want to go see Fight Club. They want to go see Stadium Goods. They don't mind paying the extra money. You could tell them, hey, it's way cheaper on this Facebook group, or it's way cheaper on StockX where you'll get it like, a week and a half later. But why would I care about when I got like money in my hand? It's not exactly that reselling is huge right now. There's barely anything that resells these days. It's more of a thing from the golden age of botting when they really could get a lot of the majority of pairs. And that was like 2017 to 2021 or so. But these days, there's barely any online drops. So it's just a different era. It's easier to get sneakers than era. So it's not the golden age of botting. It's the golden age of a sneaker consumer. So my advice is don't be bothered by it. Don't get down this lane where they're all greedy and they offer no value. They offer only value to people who have the money and don't care about it. Okay, next question. Sama.io from Twitter asks, how do you, as a guy from North America, view sneaker folks from Europe? Do you see shoes that are instantly out of stock in North America sitting in Europe? Or does your North American brain can't comprehend sneakers that are doing well in Europe but not in North America? And he asks, is there still a big cultural difference nowadays? Personally, I like when there was like regional differences in pop culture, in music, in sneakers. There's like Australia has a big thing with Air Max TN. Europe has a big thing with Adidas and like terrace shoes or Air Max 1s even in certain areas of like England, I guess. Not to mention like America and the Air Force One and how it's like connected to so many cities like Baltimore, St. Louis, New York, of course. But it feels like those days are, slowly kind of merging into one and kind of just like a flattening of culture. So how do I personally view sneaker folks? I like when they have their own weird things. I like when they have their peculiarities. I like that there's Adidas groups that are just focused on these terrace flat trainers and they're only like looking for Blackburn or Black Forest Ham sneakers or whatever they are. I like that Europeans don't really care for Jordans because maybe they never had an affinity for Michael Jordan. Maybe they could never watch Michael Jordan jumping from the free throw line in 1987. And if you're a French guy in Paris and you're like smoking a cigarette on a cafe, do you really want to be wearing Jordan 5s or do you want to wear like some flat trainer? So I like that these regional differences exist. I think brands should do a lot more to amplify these differences. Adidas has finally been able to capitalize on these regional differences, but kind of make it global and have the soundbar go everywhere. But that's the thing. Brands want to go global. They want to make money. In terms of like Sneakerhead sneakers and like the limited drops, sometimes you see these regional drops, but sometimes they all end up dropping on sneakers or dropping online and you can get the Japan exclusive from the online drop. And that is one thing I do miss. I do miss when you could just buy Nikes off European sites and they would ship the next day and they would be like overnighted to you. I used to stay up at like midnight PST time. I know people on the East Coast of New York City and stuff would stay up to like 3 a.m. waiting for Yeezys to drop on these European sites. So I definitely have some sort of nostalgia for that, even if that kind of online era is gone. But overall, we definitely are in like this flattening of culture era where everything's the same. Stuff is online. You're looking on Instagram, you're looking on TikTok or whatever. global brands want to sell globally and make a lot of money. So there's not going to be as much interest in doing niche stuff. So hopefully niche stuff emerges on its own. There's like subcultures and stuff that will eventually penetrate into the regular culture. And then like a new wave will start and it'll cycle all over again. But overall, yeah, Europeans, good. I like that they have their own stuff. Next question, Vladdy Boy. Oh, Vladdy Boy. Vladdy Boy is from Sneaker Market RO, Sneaker Market Romania. He is in the world of leaking and all that kind of stuff. So I would thought that he would ask me a question along those lines, but no. His question is, would you rather fight 100 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck? The answer would be 100 duck-sized horses because they're small. You can hit them with a hockey stick or something. You know, I'm Canadian, so you'd have a hockey stick and you could hit them with a hockey stick. But a whole bunch of like hockey stick swinging at a bunch of tiny horses, that's tearing ACL territory. And so I'm deathly afraid of tearing my ACL, as I've said before. Maybe that's my size 13 take. And so a lot of swinging, that's an ACL or Achilles injury right there. So, but also if you're battling a horse-sized duck, you're battling a duck. Whereas if you're battling a bunch of tiny duck-sized horses, those are horses. And using the law of Young Thug, horses don't stop, they keep going. So I'm assuming they will just keep riding on by. Next question, Justin Dyer, friend of the show. Justin asks, if you could have anyone on the show, who would it be? Maybe a sneaker answer and a non-sneaker answer. The sneaker answer would probably be Ronnie Feig. I'd love to have Ronnie Feig on and talk about some of the things that are brought up on this show. Because a lot of it does apply to Kith, about how you have to have a name and face out there, what it takes to release collabs, what it takes to have a sneaker retail store. Another person like that would be like Frank Cook. And there was a certain time where a friend was assisting me in talking to Frank about doing the show, but it just didn't work out. It was my fault in terms of timing wise. I was going to Japan and now he's working at Nike, so it's probably a lot harder getting someone at Nike on the show. But both those answers, I feel like I could ask them to be on the show, and I know enough people that know them. And if they say no, they say no. It's all right. I asked. And so one day I probably will formally ask when I'm ready. I don't want to make that mistake again where it's just bad timing. For a non-sneaker answer, I really don't think I would ever have like non-sneaker people on the show. I really am one of the few sneaker podcasts that 100% talks about sneakers all the time, only sneakers. No filler, no banter, no nothing. I wanted to create a show that was 100% sneakers because that's what I was looking for. So I'm always keeping that in mind, keeping a sneaker podcast listening audience member in mind. But I could interview people who are like sneaker adjacent, either like business people behind the scenes that do stuff, or even if I had the chance, like celebrities or something. For example, like the Young Bucks are tag team wrestlers in AEW wrestling, and they always wear sneakers in the ring. And they were on an episode of Sneaker History Podcast where friend of the show Andrew Siegel helped interview them. So check out that episode as well. And sort of semi-related is next question from Bobby Two Turned. Who would make the best collab between a pro wrestler and a sneaker brand? And for pro wrestling, I much prefer AEW than WWE. I do like wrestlers in both. So I will watch WWE, at least like the pay-per-views. So I'm not a regular watcher, but I know there are some pro wrestlers that do have sneaker deals. Reebok has a deal with AEW. Swerve Strickland has like these Reebok Answer 3s coming out, and Young Bucks had some Reeboks as well too. And before Reebok, I think they had a collab with Diadora, and they had a couple of those. I don't have any of those sneakers. I don't have the desire to combine, 2 or 3 of the things that I like. But the best partnership, I think, is from WWE. Roman Reigns has a partnership with Jordan Brand, and so Roman Reigns Jordan 1, I heard was coming at one point. I'm not sure if that was just a mix-up with the term Bloodline, where Jordan Brand has like a bunch of sneakers called Bloodline, and that's what Roman Reigns' faction is called, Bloodline. But lately, Roman Reigns is not like a central character on their show, so maybe when he comes back and the timing matches up, where he goes on, say, like a huge babyface run, that they can drop an official Jordan 1 collab or Jordan 5 collab, whatever it is, and I think that would hit. WWE is obviously huge, and there'll be a lot of fans. Okay, last question. Sneaker Fetish Kari asks, If you could smack anyone in sneakers with no recourse, who would it be and why? Well, that's an easy answer. I'd smack Kari right in the fucking mouth. I'm kidding, of course. I would not punch Kari in the fucking mouth. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would, but not me. I don't really have a problem with Kari. We've resolved a lot of our issues. I said this to him privately. I said, look, there's a lot of things we agree on, but some things we're just not going to agree on. We're going to be on the opposite side. So it doesn't mean that we can't meet in the middle once in a while. So it's fine to be on the opposite side of a sneaker take. So with that said, I'm not violent. I'm a nice Canadian. So I would not go around and smack anyone in the back of the head or anything like that. So he had to follow up and said, okay, who do you feel needs to go fuck themselves? And the first name that came to mind was Kanye with all his Hitler shit. And I've been reading a few history books on World War II, as I talked about a few episodes ago. And some are from the 60s, and I've been reading some more modern ones as well too. And they've covered a lot of like new information from new documents and stuff that they found on him. And I gotta say, the more I learn about this Hitler fella, the more I don't care for him. Not a good person. And of course, the SockJig Sneaker Podcast is the only sneaker podcast that has gone on the record to declare itself an anti-Hitler sneaker podcast. The other sneaker podcasts, they have not made that declaration. I've been listening. I don't know where they stand. I'm assuming they don't care for Hitler, but the SockJig Sneaker Podcast, anti-Hitler sneaker podcast. The second name that comes to mind of who can go fuck themselves is you. Please, go fuck yourself. Thanks for listening, though.